not very. Now it is. Now, there it is. It was going off and on. It wouldn't say. Okay. I hesitated to relate this story to you because it's a little embarrassing, but it is what it is. And so here goes. I'm going to tell you a story, my story, about having learned at the age of 80 plus that I have two fathers. It all began a long time ago when I was about 12 or 13 years old. Some of my relatives used to tease me, saying I wasn't truly a Fritz. Curious and confused, I went to my grandmother and asked her what they meant. My grandmother always knew everything, so I knew she would. She gently assured me it wasn't true and told me not to worry about it. But growing up, I couldn't help but notice that I didn't resemble any of my siblings or other Fritz family members. And as the oldest of 7 children, I always quietly wondered. Then in 2019, my 2 daughters decided to join 23andMe and receive their DNA results. Around the same time, my sister up in Iowa also did a test. When we compared the results, we noticed something strange. Many of the names that showed up as relatives for my daughters did not appear on my sister's list. I was persuaded to take a DNA test myself, and when the results came back, I was absolutely stunned. The test showed that my sister and I were only half-sisters. I could hardly believe it. Later, another sibling took the test and matched my sister as a full sibling, but only a half a match to me. There it was, undeniable proof. I was the odd man out. My daughters dove into weeks of online research, reaching out for DNA, to do 2 DNA matches. Many of the distant cousins were generous and kind, helping us piece together the truth. Eventually, we found my biological father. The first slide I have, please. No, the first one. No. There. He's a man named Sidney Smith. He was from the same town in Iowa, attended the same high school as my mother and the man I thought was my father. They all belonged to the same church. I'm sure they knew each other and moved in the same circles as young people. But they are all gone now and have been for many years. So I'll never know who knew what or when. I do regret not asking my mother more about that part of her life, but I've come to accept that it doesn't really matter now. Sidney Smith joined the Army. I have another slide, I think. Joined the Army as a sharpshooter in 1942 and was sent to France to serve our country. He lost his life there just 3 months, short months later, and is buried in the Lorraine American Cemetery in France. He was awarded the Purple Heart for his sacrifice. He was married at the time, but had no other children. I hope one day one of my children, will be able to visit his grave and leave flowers there for me. I'm sorry, I read through this about 4 times, trying not to choke up. I've since then met my first cousin, Judy, and that's the slide you saw there. We truly resemble each other. My boys share the same gene as the Smiths and have Sidney's red hair. Even some of my great-grandchildren inherited his red hair. The real gift in all of this has been discovering an entirely new branch of family right here in Texas, in the Houston area. It was quite a blow to learn all this so late in life. It took me a few weeks to come to terms with it, but eventually I realized I'm still the same person I've always been, and that hasn't changed. The man I always thought of as my father, my Fritz father, also served in World War II. He was sent to the South Pacific as a medic and a paratrooper. He fought on the island of Guadalcanal, where he earned both Purple Heart and Silver Star. He married my mother in January of 1939. And one of my earliest memories of him is riding in the back of a big, slow-moving truck with my mom and some of his siblings on the way to a picnic. He'd jump off and pretend to push the truck from behind, making everyone laugh. But the war changed him. He returned home with what we now call PTSD. Back then, it was called shell shock. And I don't think he even really was technically diagnosed with that. He struggled deeply, returning to alcohol. He would disappear for weeks at a time, leaving my mother alone to care for us with no money and no way to get food or help. It was a really hard life. And yet I always knew he loved me. It's small things, but I knew. When I had my first daughter, he was so proud. She was the first grandchild on both sides of the family, so she got a lot of attention. I remember watching from the window as he crossed the street, carrying a brand new wooden high chair he had bought for her. He had that look of pride on his face, the kind that sticks with you forever. All my babies used that high chair over the years. All the time he was alive, he was always bringing me small gifts, my family. One time he showed up when I was pretty young with a turkey, and it still had its feathers on it. And I said, "Dad, I don't know what to do with that." And he says, "Oh, I'll show you." He stayed all day and helped me fix that turkey. We defeathered it, or whatever you call it, and we got it ready for the oven, and I baked it the next day, and it was delicious. But he did help me. He showed me what to do, so it was fun. Another time he showed up, he said he bought this pickup truck, and this German Shepherd, this little female German Shepherd, came with the truck. And he couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't use the dog. He said, "I can't take the dog with me, everywhere I go." He said, "I thought you guys would like it." And my kids were just at the age where, of course, once they saw that dog, there was no way to say, "No, you can't have it," So we had a dog from then on. So we named her Baby, and she was a big baby. She was a lot of fun. Another time he showed up when I was married to Paul, and we lived on an acreage, and he had a whole flock of chickens. And he said, "I thought you guys could use some laying hens out here." And so we made a place for him, and we kept the chickens, and we had laying chickens for a while. So, it was just small things, but he was always doing things like that. He was just a fun man, In his later years, I think he found a kind of peace. People around town knew him as the man who sold early sweet corn and cantaloupe from the back of his truck. He would go down to Missouri early in the spring and get the stuff that was already ripe and bring it back to Cedar Rapids. And, of course, people would just gobble it up. So he made a living selling that stuff in the spring. He lived into his early 80s and spent his final 6 years in a nursing home. He still smoked. He always smoked a pack a day at least. And when I was young, it was Camels. It wasn't even filtered, but as he aged, it was filtered. He smoked when they would let him in the nursing home. He'd have to go outside, and they rationed it like one a day or two a day or something, but he still smoked. And he sat for his meals at a table full of ladies, and I'm sure he charmed every one of them. Even in his old age, his mind remained sharp. He remembered people he hadn't seen in years. He recognized my youngest son, Tom, and his wife, Angie, even after their long tour of duty in Japan with the Air Force. He knew what rank they held and where that rank stood. At his funeral, they honored him with full military honors, including the 21-gun salute. My siblings honored me in their own special way. They gave me his medals and the folded American flag from his coffin, beautifully mounted in a frame with a photo of him receiving his medals. That's what you see up here. I brought it today, so to share it with you. It's one of my most cherished possessions. That's him up there. Thank you for listening to me. That's my story of two dads.
Someone's calling you. Okay, now this story of my father. Yeah, here we go again with World War II. That's my dad. That picture, he was born in 1919 in Cushing, Maine. And that picture was taken around 1922. And my mother wrote on the back of it, he was already getting ready to live in Texas. Whoops, you go back. Note the guns. They're wooden, but they're guns. Although in Maine, they had really big deer and all that, and they did hunt, for food and fish also. Okay, next one. And he graduated from high school in 1937 and earned a living as a fisherman and a lobsterman. They lived right there on the coast of Maine. But then in 1940, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps and went to training in Harlingen, Texas. And that's where his love of Texas started. And he said he was always going to come back there one day. Next. And there he is. He was trained to be a waist gunner on a B-17, what they called the Flying Fortress. And he was a waist gunner. There were two waist gunners, and they were located directly opposite one another on the airplane. And those were monster big B-17s, and made maneuvering a little hard with their guns, with back-to-back sort of. And until later models, frostbite was an issue because you're up high and the windows, of course, are open for your guns. And so a lot of them most of them wore heavy layers of shearling and leather protective clothing. Next. And there he is in his shearling, right there. That's my dad. I don't know what that nickname is that they'd written across it. It says B.C. Geyer right there, but that was whatever that was. But his nickname in the Army was Spud because Mainers are known for digging potatoes, also known as spuds. Then that's when he was sent to England, where he flew on 14 missions in an airplane named Dear Mom. All the airplanes were named. The last mission ending in tragedy. Next. Now this is the nose of the Dear Mom. You can see it right there. Can y'all in the back see okay? Okay. I don't know who that was. I don't even know if that was, well, obviously it was one of the missions he was on. And now I'm going to read directly from, because they did it better than I could, Sioux City newspaper, written in 1944, titled, "Miracle Saved Tech Sergeant Geyer When a Bomb Blew Up His Airplane, the Dear Mom." He became a training instructor, and that's when they interviewed him. And I actually have these big copies of the newspaper with the pictures and everything, but there's way too much to cram into 10 or 15 minutes. But this says, on August 17th, while leading the formation on a run over Randsburg, Germany, Dear Mom took her worst shellacking. At first it was only flak, but flak was enough to force Geyer's fortress out of formation, to give the German fighter pilots the opportunity to come in for the kill. The number 4 engine was burning fiercely, spouting flames way past the tail. There was also a fire in the bomb bay where there were 1,000-pound bombs, along with smaller types of bombs. Then they quote my father. The waist gunner and I both caught a piece, the other waist gunner, and I both caught a piece of shrapnel. I was crawling to the escape hatch when the pilot rang the warning bell to bail out. The tail gunner went out first, and his parachute caught fire. From the flames from the number 4 engine, there was nothing we could do. I pulled myself up to the hatch, and just then the 1,000-pound bomb exploded. We were at about 22,000 feet then, and when I came to and released my parachute, I was at 12,000 feet. I realized what had happened. I wasn't sure I was alive, though. My clothes had all been blown off, almost all been blown off. My face was cut up, some of my teeth had been knocked out, and I later found out that my back had been badly injured. As soon as Geyer landed, a Nazi patrol appeared. This was occupied Belgium. They apparently had seen the explosion and the parachute floating down. Fortunately, Geyer was able to conceal himself in some brush. After an unsuccessful search, the patrol went away. And then the article goes on to say everything else is classified. Can't tell you why he's here now. He was there. But the next picture, this is the actual airplane after it crashed. And I'm not sure if, whoops, wrong way, if that is a German soldier or a local policeman. I can't tell. And this was taken by a civilian townsman in that town while he was hiding. Maybe I should go to another part of this and then go back to this. My father passed away in 95, and in about 2011 or 12, I got a phone call. It said Marble Falls, Texas, and I thought, I don't know anybody there, but well, maybe it's one of my sister's kids, flat tire or something. He said, are you the Lynn Geyer whose father was shot down over Belgium in 1943? I said, yes, I am. Kind of like, well, and what's it to you? And he said, I just try to get people that are looking for other people together. He said, and I will only give out your information if I have your approval. And he said, there's a gentleman named Rudy Kennis who is from the small town, Lummen, where your father was shot down and where the villagers took him in and hid him. And he's writing a book about the dear mom. And he wants to do a monument. Okay. Once he got in touch with me, and we've been Facebook friends for years now. I love the internet sometimes. He sent me a whole bunch of information. I sent him a whole bunch of information. We even had letters that this Belgian family had written in French to my grandmother after the war to see if my dad was okay, that kind of thing. But anyway, he also got, I have a video, but it's too horrible to show, so we don't. But they have what they call an after-action report that you do in the military, and this is straight from that. This, again, someone was interviewing. It says, Sergeant Geyer said the crew was expecting P-47 escorts, American, but they never showed up. What he thought was a formation of escorts turned out to be the swarm of German, I can't pronounce it. Anyway, they were airplanes. One of them was piloted by the famed German ace Karl Boris, who opened fire, striking Dear Mom's oil tanks. I have a picture of him. I don't have it with me, but I have a picture of Boris. He lived into the 1950s, and he actually, one of the crew members later said that as he was going down, this fighter plane came very close to him, and he thought he would probably shoot him down, and instead, Boris tipped his wing, which is a thing of respect, and he got to live. Okay. Sergeant Geyer said he saw oil and pieces of the wing fly past him as the plane flipped to one side and started to go down. And that's when everybody bailed out and everything exploded. And there's lots of horrendous details, but he said he was in went to a cow pasture with nothing to eat, you know, everything gone. All the first aid kit, everything that had been in his pants pockets was gone. The clothes were gone. But a farmer came and gave him food and money and everything else. And I'm going to skip a lot of this. Took him to a place where his journey from Lummen, Belgium, began via the Comet Line, Pyrenees route, which was like the French underground part. He was hidden by a local family for a week or two, then on a train to the border, got off several times, Nazi soldiers patrolling, changed all these different guides. Then they had to ride bicycles for quite some time. Then the guide took them over the mountains, and then Spain wouldn't let them in once they got there. And altogether, now this was August 17th. He arrived in Spain on 28 October, Gibraltar November 28, flew out of Gibraltar and arrived back in the United Kingdom on the 3rd of December. It was a long time getting back. Next slide. Okay, don't know if you can see this too good. That's my dad, and there's the future HEB lady. Right there. And that was in 1944 when he went, well, this was in 46, but he went back. He went to Sioux City in 44, and then they moved to Maine, and he became a state prison guard. And after that, see what did he do? He went back into, he worked at the prison, then he went back in the military, and we went to New Hampshire, we went to Newfoundland, 4 years in England, Thailand, the Philippines. I forget where else he was, but a lot of different places that sometimes I was with him, sometimes I wasn't. Oh, in San Antonio, of course. He was stationed here for a while. And then if you want to show the next slide here. Okay, this is from the top of the monument that I mentioned earlier. It says, the fate of the dear mom is just a footnote in the grim annals of World War II, but it will always be remembered in Lummen, Belgium. A retired teacher, Rudy Kennis, as I told you, had been researching and writing a book. And when they did this monument, we have a Facebook page just for this. It says, may this monument keep the memory alive and pay tribute to all the great men who paid the highest price for our freedom, those who came back and those who never returned, lest we forget. Next slide. There were the crosses. Those are the gentlemen that were killed in action when that plane was crashed. I'm not sure which, oh yeah. The long one, that's POW, that's POW. And then my father's name is one up from the bottom, and the other gentleman escaped. Now the POWs, from what I've been able to read, both made it through to the end of the war. And their families came for the big ceremony. And it was 70 years in 2013. And I couldn't go. My bank account and my doctor said, no, I don't think so. And there's another picture, the ceremony. They had officials from NATO. They had officials from, of course, the Air Force there, but they also had the Army and several others. I've got lots and lots of pictures. This is just a little bit. Don't call me Trump just because I'm having this ceremony. Let's see, Arizona. I can't read my own writing, so. And the next one, that's Rudy and his 2 grandkids later. At night, right there, that's a light that shines up. Now Rudy, you can go to the next one. This monument in Belgium, Rudy and his fellow villagers raised all the money and got grants and whatnot to do this monument. Not a nickel from the families or anything. They never asked us for anything. The World War II honoree, if you see here it says honored by his daughter, that means I paid for that, for his name to be on the Washington Wall. And that was the only way it was going to be there. It does say that he won the Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal, several Purple Hearts, and the Three Oak Cluster. And then the next picture, he retired from the Air Force in the early 70s. And he's in civilian clothes because he was in the OSI, which was nothing like the $6 Million Man OSI. And it's nothing like NCIS, but it was the equivalent of the FBI, but for the Air Force. And then the final slide, his ashes are scattered under an oak tree that looks very much like that. Thank you for letting me share my story. And then we have the closing music, I believe.
I remember Daddy's hands folded silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare.